Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're cutting through the noise of the latest newspaper. We're pulling out some vital insights from four really distinct articles. They touch on, well, everything from legal systems to global geopolitics, from individual stories of resilience to the surprising triumph of culture. We've got quite a journey ahead, looking at pieces from the editorial, ground zero, and weekend sections. So let's get right into it. Okay, first up from the editorial section, we begin with a deep dive into something that might seem, purely internal to the judiciary. But as our source material reveals, it actually impacts the very fabric of democracy. We're talking about the system of senior advocates in India. The article is called Judicial Equality and Legal Plutocracy in India, and it digs into recent Supreme Court decisions. Cases like Jitender et Kala in 2025 and Indira Jaising from 2017 and 2023. So what's really at the heart of this? And I guess why should you, the listener, care about this distinction?
Well, what's really fascinating here is how the article zeroes in on Section 16 of the Advocates Act, 1961. This law basically classifies lawyers into two tiers, senior advocates and just advocates. Now, the source argues this introduces a kind of, well, Orwellian notion that some are more equal than others, right into a profession that's supposed to be all about equality. The author suggests this classification has fostered what they call a legal oligarchy, even a legal plutocracy in India, and that has pretty deep impacts on both judicial and political democracy. It's systemic.
Illegal plutocracy, that's a strong claim. And the article, it doesn't stop there, does it? It draws this parallel with the U.S.
Yeah.
Yeah, it mentions a 2014 Reuters report, the Echo Chamber. Apparently, it found that just 66 lawyers out of, 17,000 were responsible for nearly half, 43%, of all appeals to the U.S. Supreme Court between 2004 and 2012, mostly representing big corporate firms.
Exactly. And the source here warns that India's system is, really vulnerable to that same kind of danger. It could accelerate what the article calls the commercialization of the legal profession, creating potentially an echo chamber at the highest court.
Okay, so if it's that problematic, why hasn't it been tackled head on? What did the courts actually do in those cases you mentioned, Indira Jaising and Jitender?
That's the crux of the criticism in the article. It argues the Supreme Court, in those judgments, kind of sidestepped the fundamental issue. They essentially endorsed Section 16, the classification itself, with what the author feels is inadequate reasoning. Instead, they focused on more peripheral reforms, things like tweaking the process for designating senior advocates. In fact, the latest judgment even called the old point-based assessment method highly subjective, but well, it let the application system continue anyway. So that bigger question is this kind of classification even constitutional? Does it violate equality principles? That, according to the article, remains unaddressed.
Right. So bringing it back to the everyday person, the average citizen who might need legal help. What does this all mean practically?
Well, connecting the dots, the article really emphasizes that this systemic disparity is, and I'm quoting here, horrendous. It argues it leads to a form of intellectual apartheid. Basically, women and lawyers from marginalized groups often get sidelined because the designation tends to favor those already in established networks. It sort of mirrors the judiciary's own composition sometimes. And the bottom line, it means that litigation, especially in the court, becomes the privilege of the rich, which, as the article points out, just doesn't square with India's constitutional vision of a socialist republic built on equality. The jurist F.S. Merriman apparently even called it a caste system among lawyers. So it's really about fundamental access to justice.
A caste system among lawyers. Wow. Okay, let's pivot now. We're moving to geopolitics, still in the editorial section, looking at India's neighborhood. This next article is titled China's Trilateral Strategy Against India. It highlights a relatively new challenge for New Delhi, these China-led trilateral meetings. We recently saw China, Pakistan, and Bangladesh hold their first one, and that came right after another meeting involving China, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. This feels significant.
It does seem significant, and the timing is particularly interesting, as the article points out. These trilaterals are popping up just as Pakistan's regional influence seems to be waning a bit, while India's ties with Afghanistan are growing and its relationship with Bangladesh has seen some strain. So the article suggests China's aim here is pretty clear. It's about strategically boosting Pakistan's relevance again. The goal seems to be keeping New Delhi preoccupied with immediate concerns, creating new issues on its borders. And crucially, this also helps pave the way for China's Big Belt and Road Initiative projects in the region. It's quite a calculated move.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit more. The source reminds us this isn't entirely new, is it, this strategy? The 1962 war apparently really shaped how China saw the region. It started viewing Pakistan as a key ally, specifically to keep India sort of bogged down. And Pakistan, well, it leans heavily on China, right, for economic support, military aid.
Oh, definitely. The article mentions Pakistan had over $29 billion in loans from China by the end of 2024. That's a huge figure. And something like 80% of its arms imports, they come from China. So this camaraderie, as the article calls it, is deep. We saw it recently during India's Operation Sindhu in May 2025. That was India's retaliation after the Pahalgam terror attack. China called India's action regrettable and publicly supported Pakistan.
Right. So given this history and this sort of renewed push with the trilaterals, how has India been responding to this +1 strategy, as the article terms it?
Well, India's response seems to have shifted quite decisively over the past few years. It's retaliated forcefully after major attacks like Uri in 2016, Pulwama in 2019, and the recent Pahalgam incident. The message seems to be that India won't tolerate what the article calls nuclear blackmail anymore. The implicit threat from a nuclear-armed neighbor. Beyond military responses, India has also used diplomatic and economic tools, things like suspending parts of the Indus Waters Treaty, restricting trade, limiting port access, actions aimed at imposing costs, and, importantly, India's firm military and diplomatic handling of Chinese border intrusions in places like Daklam and Galwan seems to have surprised Beijing a bit. It's pushed India towards closer ties with other global powers, too.
So it sounds like India is pushing back, maybe even gaining some ground. The article mentions shifts in places like the Maldives, Nepal, Sri Lanka, where China's influence might be slowing.
That's the suggestion, yes. Things seem to be shifting. For instance, the Maldives president, despite earlier rhetoric, is now engaging more with India. Sri Lanka is prioritizing ties with New Delhi. And if we zoom out, the really crucial point the article makes, the main takeaway, is that China, and not Pakistan, is India's biggest challenge. Beijing is essentially using Islamabad as a tool to create new problems, new complexities for India, trying to counter India's growing influence. So for you, the listener, understanding this helps make sense of the intricate power dynamics in South Asia. It explains why India keeps emphasizing its red lines, making it clear that any misadventures by its neighbors will come with serious economic, military, and political costs. It's a very high-stakes game.
Okay, moving from that geopolitical chessboard, let's turn to the human impact of conflict. We're now looking at the ground zero section. Our next deep dive is on Operation Sindhu, evacuating Indian students from conflict zones. This piece really paints a vivid, quite harrowing picture of the fear and uncertainty faced by Indian nationals, especially students, caught in that recent Israel-Iran conflict. It puts a human face on these big events.
It really does. And what's striking is both the scale of the operation and the personal stories. The Indian government evacuated over 1,400 people from Iran and more than 1,100 from Israel under this Operation Sindhu. But it's the individual accounts that hit home. The article tells the story of Suhail Qadri, anxiously waiting for news of his children, Imraz and Rayban. They were studying at Tehran University of Medical Sciences and actually saw Israeli bombs hitting Tehran. Imagine that fear. Other students, like someone named Hania, describe missiles hitting near their university, injuring fellow students. These aren't abstract conflicts for them. They're terrifyingly real.
Absolutely heartbreaking stories. And the article talks about students like Nargis. She took out a huge loan, worth 30 lakh, for her medical degree, her MBBS, in Iran. Why? Because tuition there was so much lower than in India, where she said a mediocre private college might cost Urs 1 crore. Now she's evacuated, stranded, worrying not just about safety, but about her entire academic future, that massive debt.
Exactly. And others, like a student named Aan, they face this fear that they might not even be able to complete their degrees if they can't go back, because the National Medical Council of India, it doesn't recognize medical degrees from every single country. So their entire career path, all the sacrifices made, could just evaporate. It's devastating.
So is this something that happens often, this kind of disruption for Indian students studying abroad?
Well, the article brings up this powerful sense of déjà vu through the experience of a Dr. Jitendra Gaurav. He was evacuated from Ukraine back in 2022 under Operation Ganga. When he eventually went back to try and finish his degree, he faced incredible challenges: soaring inflation, power shortages, and worse, many of the transfer options offered were to universities in countries whose medical degrees weren't actually valid in India. So, yeah, it highlights this recurring vulnerability for Indian students who go abroad, often seeking more affordable education options, only to find themselves caught in these incredibly precarious situations, sometimes driven by limits back home.
So when you think about these families, like the one mentioned, Amin Kachakaril, who worked for 25 years in the Gulf doing manual labor to save Rs 45 lakh for his daughter's education in Iran, what are the bigger implications here beyond the immediate danger?
Looking at the bigger picture, the article really underscores the immense sacrifices these families make for higher education. It's not just about the physical danger in conflict zones. It's also about the huge mental health toll on these young students. They're carrying the weight of their family's hopes, their financial investments. And then there's the profound uncertainty about their academic and professional futures if their degrees are interrupted or potentially invalidated. The article also subtly points a finger at the root cause, mentioning the low availability of seats in Indian medical colleges as a key factor pushing students abroad in the first place, which inherently creates this vulnerability.
Okay, let's shift gears now, moving from that uncertainty to a story of, well, cultural triumph and real passion. Our final deep dive is from the weekend section. It's about Semma, a taste of home in the heart of New York. It celebrates Chef Vijay Kumar and his truly groundbreaking restaurant. This one is genuinely inspiring.
It really is. What's so fascinating is how Chef EJ, he defied his parents' expectations. They wanted him to be an engineer or a doctor, the usual routes. Instead, he's brought this incredibly authentic rural Tamil cooking right onto the world stage in Manhattan. His restaurant, Semma, has picked up some major awards, the James Beard Award for Best Chef in New York State, a Michelin star. And get this, it became the first Indian restaurant ever to top New York Magazine's list of the 100 best restaurants. That's huge. His mom apparently only really understood how big a deal it was when their whole village started celebrating him.
That's amazing. And his personal story is so central to it, isn't it? The article talks about him growing up in these tiny villages near Madurai, foraging for snails in paddy fields, cooking in mud pots, eating off banana leaves. That's the experience he's bringing. He and his partners, they took a massive risk, serving dishes like snails, goat intestines, even deer meat, and keeping the South Indian names Tamil, Malayalam, Telugu. He calls it unapologetic food. Like, we want to cook just how we cook back home. That commitment is pretty remarkable in a place like New York.
It is. And it begs the question, how did New Yorkers react? This unique, unapologetic approach. Did it work? Well, the article says there was some pushback initially, people expecting the usual, chicken tikka masala, naan bread, the stereotypes. But Semma quickly found this incredibly fierce loyalty, especially among the Indian diaspora. There's a great quote from the TV host Padma Lakshmi on Instagram, basically saying, Semma isn't made for you, it's made for us. She added that even if only South Asians went there, it would probably be booked solid for a decade. That really speaks volumes, doesn't it, about that hunger for real, authentic cultural representation.
Absolutely. And the popularity sounds insane. The article mentions 1,290 people on the wait list every night. For just 65 seats, people apparently stand outside in 100-degree heat hoping for a table. That's incredible. He must be getting so much love from back home in India and Tamil Nadu, too.
Oh, immense love, yes. But looking at the bigger picture, Chef Vijay's whole journey is just this powerful testament to staying true to your roots and how authenticity can have global appeal. Even with all this success, the article mentions he still craves his mother's fish curry and idiyappam. He wants to go home, touch the soil, eat on a banana leaf. And his message to the kids at his old school, where they have a banner celebrating them now, is just so poignant. He tells them, keep trying. Nothing is easy. If it comes easy, what is the point? He talks about having no shoes because they couldn't afford them. But he says, I would not change any of that because it has led me here. It's such a strong reminder that passion, perseverance, embracing who you are, it can overcome anything, even walking barefoot to school. As we wrap up this deep dive today, covering everything from judicial systems and geopolitics to these very personal stories of struggle and triumph of thought occurs. It strikes me how these seemingly disparate narratives, they're all kind of woven together by this relentless pursuit of something better. Whether it's fighting for a fairer legal system, striving for a secure nation, seeking an uninterrupted education against the odds, or even just recreating a taste of home far away. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? In a world that often feels like it's pushing towards globalization, towards homogenization. Where do we draw the line? How do we balance adapting for progress with fiercely preserving those unique, sometimes challenging parts of our identity, the things that make us and our cultures truly extraordinary? Something to ponder.
Thank you for listening. If today's episode gave you something useful, consider following us on Spotify so you're the first to hear the next one. You can give suggestions by contacting on Twitter handle given in the episode description. We are always eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.